and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin, here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is stepping from the past into potential. So, should be a fun conversation. And what we're looking at is freeing ourselves from our history so that we can fulfill our greatest potentials and possibilities. So, before we get started, we're just going to take a couple minutes to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to be here with you this morning. And we're talking about stepping from the past into potential. So why? Why do we need to leave the past behind in order to step into potential? So potential is an emergent quality. Our capacity is something that is emergent. And while we may use positive information from the past to inform us in our activities, the past, as we conceive of it, is bounded. It's bounded, but by what we tend to interact with as fact. However, so much of our past or our experience of the past is a remembering, a reassembling, an interpretation. And oftentimes that interpretation and that remembrance is not the most positive that it could be. So when we want to step into possibility, the freest way to do that is without being encumbered, limited, constrained by the history. Now, it might sound like denial, to say, well, that didn't well, I'm not saying that we're not saying to step into that didn't really happen, but we're wanting to step out of the limits that we're imposing on ourselves because of that. So here's an example. So many of us have been wounded in love, right? Broken hearts and fragile souls, right? And so that brokenheartedness or that history, when we're living out of that history or through that history, it may make us reticent to actually take on or be open to the potential or the possibility of a new relationship because we've already been so hurt. So it's the memory of the hurt that constrains us and closes off all kinds of possibilities and potential because we're living in that past. If we can somehow allow the past to be gone, to be past, if we can glean, this is the tricky part, if we can glean wisdom from it without the oppression of it. So this is a tricky piece because we often mistake our interpretations, our limiting interpretations as wisdom. So we know, for instance, that it's not a great idea to put your hand on a burner that is where there are flames, right? We know this because we've experienced it, perhaps, or we've been cautioned strongly enough against it that we don't do it. The thing is that there's so many constraints that we adopt like this that are not as black and white and are not really in truth as threatening. So again, matters of the heart. It's a risk. It's a risk to love somebody. There's no question about that. And the joy and the expansion that's available to us when we do allow ourselves to connect deeply with another person is an extraordinary experience, and it's an enriching and enlivening one. So to allow ourselves that possibility is life affirming, right? It steps into potential for who knows what could occur. We tend to believe that because something has happened in the past, that the past is a predictor of the future. That's really what we're talking about here. And the past is a predictor of the future, particularly when we take the past and put it in front of us and then live into it, because we recreate it in an almost deliberate way. So we tend to generalize, we tend to take experiences and generalize them to the way things are, rather than recognizing that that experience was an experience. And an example of this that was so profound was with a client who had an experience where they were feeling free and playful, and they had an interaction as in this state of just lightness. They had an interaction with someone, and that someone got very triggered. And to this day, that person that was light and jovial and playful doesn't know why that person got triggered, but they made a decision in that moment that they couldn't be themselves because it would hurt other people if they were expressing themselves. And this aspect of their past, what they've done is they've taken that past and set it directly in front of them. And as a result, all the possibilities that could be arising in being fully expressed aren't available to them because they've closed it off. So that there's all this potential that is missing, and this capacity for life and expression. So this conversation comes about partly for from a revelation that I had about a relationship that I have in my family, where I realized in order to express some heartfelt feelings, it would require me to step out of my history in this relationship and to step into a space of my uncensored expression, censored out of fear of how somebody might respond, uh, censored out of fear of being hurt or being rejected, being misunderstood, but to be stepping out of the history of those patterns. And it doesn't mean being foolish, because yes, there's the possibility that I won't be responded to in the way that I would desire. However, if I never make the expression, I'll never know. And so I can be aware that that's a possibility and step out of my own constraints, step outside of the restrictions that I've placed upon myself with coherence and alignment and integrity, not just not in a reactive way, but in a way that is in alignment with my values and respect for another person, to take that chance, knowing that it's a chance and not being attached to the outcome having to be a particular way, not needing the other person to respond in a specific way. And I think that that's an important thing to be looking at, is that we often interact out of our expectations. We interact out of reactivity, and we interact out of our expectations, where it's kind of like when we say I love you, we expect you to say I love you in return, right? And if that doesn't happen, then there's a pulling back, a constriction. But if we can say I love you with no expectation, then the whole dynamic shifts. And then we can be receiving, if that person responds. In meantime, we're able to have the expression that we need to express. So, Mickey, hi. Thank you for chiming in here. Am I saying your name right? It's Milky. Milky, hi. Milky says, welcome back. So good to have you here with us. Welcome. So we're talking about allowing the past to be behind us rather than taking the past, putting it in front of us, and then living into it. And when we allow the past to be behind us, and when we can act from a place of non-attachment. That's not a minor thing either. It's not like it's an easy thing. Simple, but not easy. But what can happen is that new worlds that we never anticipated can open to us. And there's a fear a bit of the unknown. And when we put the past behind us and live beyond it, we're stepping into the unknown. We're allowing that there may be things that present themselves that we hadn't anticipated. There may be outcomes that we hadn't anticipated, that we can really truly find a way to be present in the moment. This is really what stepping out of the past is, and stepping into potential, because the future is emergent, right? When we're in the present moment, not living with the past right in front of us, walking into that and reliving that at multitudes of times, we're in a place of responsiveness when we're in the present. So much of our experience is conditioned by the pain of the past, and therefore we're very reactive. When we encounter a situation that triggers a memory, triggers an experience from the past, we react to that as if it's happening now, but it isn't. And this is the big challenge, is to recognize it's not happening now. It happened, and it's not necessarily predictive. So Mary, welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. Mary says, so needed this right now. Alignment, beautifully said. I'm delighted that it resonates for you, Mary. I think we are so conditioned, and really that's what conditioning is patterning something in our experience, so that when we encounter that situation again, we're using that pattern. And oftentimes those patterns are not particularly productive. So when we can essentially find peace with the past, what we're looking to do is to deactivate the triggers, to dissolve the triggers, which are the things that are holding us prisoner in so many ways we hold ourselves prisoner with the attachment to the past, with allowing the past to define us, and not only to define us, but to define our behavior. I learned that if I do this, there's a consequence. And in many, many cases, that's true, right? We know that if we scream fire in a theater, that we could get arrested, right? There are certain things that they're good things to know. But when we, I guess this is all on a spectrum, right? Because yelling fire in a theater, not such a great idea. How about, though, when we have the opportunity for love? And I can say for myself, I've seen where I've shut myself off in so many ways out of fear of that level of vulnerability or fear of getting hurt. And when we can allow ourselves to step out of that, say, yes, okay, that can happen. And we can recognize, yes, that can happen. We can take advantage of the wisdom that we have, but we don't need to pull it into the future. We don't need to make foregone conclusions. That we don't need to determine, well, that's how it always is. Because perhaps, if something really awful was happening in a theater outside of a fire, it might be okay to yell fire to get everybody in action to stop whatever that horrible thing is. So it's beholden to us to be present enough to use our wisdom, but to not be stifled by what I'm going to call maybe false truths that we make, the determinations that we make about life and how it is, and then we live from that and we live into that. And one way that we can look at this too is how we make generalizations. We make generalizations about other people. We make generalizations about other cultures. And we live into those generalizations as if they're truth. So the bottom line, I guess, it comes back to two things: presence and curiosity. Presence can allow us to recognize our patterns. Curiosity can help us transcend them. And how that can happen is by asking questions like, what if I have a trigger? What do I have to think to feel this way? What is it that I'm remembering in this moment? How these questions are questions that can help us to diffuse these triggers. Is like, what's going on here? What is that from? Rather than trying to make a story that justifies the reaction in the present moment. And that's tempting. That's really, really tempting when someone does something and we get upset. We typically will make a story about them and what they did to warrant our reaction. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you joining us this morning. So rather than making up the stories, and that's really, really hard because we're just so deeply triggered. I've seen myself at times when I was deeply triggered, making up this whole story, making up this really damning scenario about why this person is wrong and why I'm right and how dare they, and being indignant, and then being able to step back and say, okay, so what's really going on here? What is it that brought forth that extreme reaction? It's something in the past, I guarantee you, and it was. And it allowed me the opportunity then to go back and dissolve that by giving myself what I needed at the time. Recognizing that there was a wound that already existed, and this person had the misfortune of stepping on a mine that just blew up. Because in so many ways, we are each our own minefields, right? We each have our own triggers and these landmines that are placed all over the place. And somebody can just be walking along, skipping along, and bam, all of a sudden they activate one of these triggers. And then there's upset. And when those triggers get activated, if I'm the one that stepped on the landmine, then I might be, that's a trigger for me going forward unless I clear it, right? And the meaning I associate with it, like I can't be myself because when I'm myself, somebody gets upset. Not necessarily the right conclusion. There was a minefield waiting for you, and you stepped on a landmine. We do that. So if we can leave the past behind, like take a lesson rather than chains or ropes, constraints, take something under advisement and recognize that that happened that time. In other words, to hold what we know with open hand. So that to say, okay, well, in love, I know I can get hurt. And rather than so, I'm not going to fall in love. And a new experience. There's so much more than just the hurt, for example. So holding life with open hand, letting our past be past so that we can live into this vast expanse of possibility that is opening out before us. That's today's invitation. And that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And until next time, I'm just so grateful to you for the opportunity to share in these morning musings.